Next, we have Karen Rose Mathews, who is an associate professor in the Department of Art and Art History at the University of Miami. She received her BA in art history from UCLA and her master's and PhD in art history from the University of Chicago. She has published extensively on the visual and material culture of the medieval and early modern Mediterranean over the past 25 years, addressing topics such as cartography as a new Mediterranean visual system, the relationship between spoils of war and spolia, the development of a common visual language in the late medieval Mediterranean, merchant identity and aesthetics in the Italian maritime republics, and the use and significance of spolia in Christian and Muslim architecture. She has published a monograph entitled Conflict, Commerce, and an Aesthetic of Appropriation in the Italian Maritime Cities, 1000 to 1150, Brill, 2018. Her current book project is entitled Making the Mamluks Mediterranean, 1250 to 1517, Spolia, Spectacle, and a Shared Visual Culture. And she'll be reading her paper, Global Trade Networks and the Travel Culture of Ceramics, 1000 to 1600.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction. It is always a pleasure to be here back at my alma mater from undergraduate. And it's exciting as well to participate in this new mission of the center on a more global scale. So if Julia was talking about micro histories, I guess I'm going macro and talking about ceramic culture from China to the Americas from 1000 to 1600. So I guess I'd better get started. Given their bulk, fragility, and humble materials, ceramics might make unlikely global objects. Yet ceramic production, consumption, and circulation united cultures from the Far East to the Mediterranean, crossing the Atlantic to the New World. Ceramics functioned within the framework of a traveling culture and international economic networks, moving freely between East and West in the medieval and early modern periods. They were truly transcultural, cosmopolitan objects that demonstrated the interest of ceramicists in engaging with and learning from other cultures to create artworks that reflect this open and innovative mindset. Connectivity between the various centers where ceramic techniques were perfected, China, the Near East, and Western Europe, created an integrated market defining varied and vibrant pathways through which people, materials, techniques, and ultimately finished wares traveled. Ceramics performed extraordinary cultural work then as global objects. In the global environment where ceramics circulated, the Western Mediterranean played a central role, particularly Iberian and Italian peninsulas. Merchants from these locales imported and exported ceramic wares, while potters served as emulators and innovators, creating a continually repeating cycle of import, imitation, and export that connected people and things from China to the Americas. So I'm going to start in the East and move west with some starts and stops in between and some reversals of direction, and sort of move in a chronological order, but that will go back and forth as well, so as not to present this as some kind of seamless and universal history. It is believed that Chinese porcelain first made its way into the Islamic world during the early years of the Abbasid dynasty. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid received a gift of Chinese porcelain from the Abbasid governor of Khorasan, likely in the late 8th century, that must have consisted of monochrome wares like these pieces shown here. The type of Chinese porcelain object that most captured the imagination of artists and collectors in the Islamic world and Europe, however, was blue and whiteware, later called export porcelain. The Islamic contribution to blue and whiteware has been noted by a number of scholars. Before the discovery of local supplies of cobalt blue, the blue pigment that was used to create this prototypical Chinese ware that you're seeing here in a variety of forms, the cobalt blue was imported from Persia. It has even been argued recently that the whiteware with blue decoration actually originated in Iran and was exported to China, only to be exported back again with Islamic designs. So we already have a reversal of this narrative I'm setting forth here of everything moving west. With a ready supply of cobalt, blue and white porcelain began to be produced in quantity in early 14th century China and was exported to the Islamic world and beyond. So this is going to be a leitmotif for the entirety of this paper. I could have done it entirely in blue and white, but wanted to show some beautiful luster that we'll get to as well. Many of the pieces that Julia showed already from the Met. Chinese blue and white porcelain met an enthusiastic reception in Islamic lands. Muslim rulers zealously collected these Chinese objects. The Ottomans, Persians, and Mughals exchanged porcelain as diplomatic gifts, and porcelain was included in plunder brought home by victorious armies. The collection in the Topkapi, for example, in Istanbul, was extensive, and Persian rulers created special porcelain rooms called chinikhanas, with cutouts in the walls that were filled with Chinese porcelains of corresponding shapes, as seen here in the music room of the Ali Kapur Palace in Isfahan. So you can see the kind of cutout shapes there, and I found some porcelain objects that could potentially have been used to place in the cutout shapes. It's not clear that that was actually the case, or whether the cutouts were used for acoustic purposes, for musical performances. Either of these, I guess, could be true at the same time, but at any rate, there is a strong correlation between the shapes of the cutouts in these chinikhana rooms and the actual shape of Chinese porcelain. New porcelain vessel shapes developed that emulated Islamic metalwork, as seen in this Ming flask on the right, that takes both its form and decoration, the boss with an 8-pointed star from Islamic metalwork. And then a very famous work, the Freer Canteen and the Freer and Sackler Galleries in Washington, D.C., as the kind of prototype for this kind of porcelain design. And then porcelain objects also incorporated Islamic iconography, Arabic calligraphy, quotes from the Quran, Persian inscriptions, and geometric ornament, specifically to appeal to a Muslim clientele. So in this set of vessels here, we have inscriptions in Arabic, sometimes correct, sometimes not. Doesn't appear that that was a particularly significant element of this decoration. What was important is that it was there, that there was Arabic writing in there. Not too far from the pseudo-Kufic that you see in a variety of monuments in Western Europe, for example. The power of the force of calligraphy alone was what made these objects precious and made them worthy of export to the Islamic world. And as I said, to appeal specifically to a Muslim clientele. In addition to collecting porcelain pieces, Muslim artists strove to imitate the whiteness, translucence, and strength of porcelain in their ceramic works. The recipe for porcelain remained a closely guarded secret. Porcelain was not produced in Western Europe until the 18th century. And so there was this great press to try to produce something that looked like porcelain, even if you didn't have the ingredients or the recipe in order to make it yourself. The earliest attempts to emulate porcelain experimented with the clay body, but the most successful solution consisted of employing tin glazing to create an opaque white surface. Ceramic shards from Mesopotamia covered with tin glaze date to the 9th century, making them the earliest white glazed pottery to be produced outside the Far East. Thus, if the shipment of porcelain to the Caliph Harun al-Rashid was the impetus, the reaction by Muslim potters was almost instantaneous. By the late 15th century, entire industries had developed to produce and export imitations of Chinese porcelain. This was particularly the case with Iznik pottery produced in Turkey. So a Chinese porcelainware on the left and an Iznik quote unquote imitation on the right. The color tone on the right image is a little gray, but I think you can see the similarities here in terms of the form, the material, the designs. So in the early time period of Iznik production, there was a great emphasis on trying to create something that looked like Chinese porcelain, blue and white porcelain. Early products closely copied Chinese prototypes in their blue and white palette, but as the industry matured, artists experimented with color and design to create truly original pottery form that enjoyed great popularity in Western Europe as well. This was the first example then that I was talking about of this cycle of import, imitation, and then export. These are a few examples of what we would call more mature, sort of mid-16th century Islamic ware. You can obviously see that the color palette has extended considerably to turquoise blue, and then this kind of prototypical Islamic pottery color, this tomato red. It's a very difficult glaze to work with, but was brought in so that these Islamic products could actually be used as decoration on architectural structures that you see here in the Topkapi on the left, and then in numerous mosques in Istanbul. There's a mosque you visited, the Blue Mosque, and that of course is filled with Islamic tiles. There was a royal monopoly on the production of tiles for architectural monuments, and so a structure like the Rüstem Pasha Mosque, the Sokolu Mehmet Pasha Mosque, all created under the aegis of this royal and elite patronage, had the most splendid Islamic tiles that could be created in that particular time. The next example I would like to talk about is green and brown ware. Another example of tin-glazed ceramics that provided the basis for Islamic innovations in pottery production. The pure white surface created the perfect canvas for the application of colored glazes and luster. We'll get to luster in just a second. One of the most widespread types of tin-glazed pottery was green and brown ware. And here I didn't even differentiate in terms of the origin of these particular pieces. You can see that they share that color of green and brown glaze on top of a tin glazed white surface. Some of them have incised designs, but they are from all over. They are from various parts of the Islamic world. They are from Byzantium. They are from Western Europe, to show the ubiquity of this pottery type, its extraordinary popularity across a wide geographical range, and numerous pottery centers that were creating these objects simultaneously for a varied clientele that extended just as widely as the production sites. The color combination of this green and brown may have been based on Chinese splashware. So once again, scholars are trying to look for a Chinese origin in this inexorable movement west. May or may not be the case. But its appearance in numerous Islamic centers simultaneously, where no such Chinese ceramics were found, makes this argument debatable. What is clear is that by the 10th century, green and brown pottery was produced and distributed widely in the Islamic world, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Spain. And then in the 11th and then later 12th centuries, it was exported to Western Europe, where it was prized as both tableware and architectural ornamentation, and then once again imitated and further exported to other locales. So this leads me to a short excursus on bacchini, a topic that I've worked on for a while. And that was my original interest in these ceramics, is their use as architectural decoration on structures throughout the Mediterranean. So bacchini are ceramic vessels used as decoration on architectural structures, including secular, but mostly religious buildings. So you see several religious buildings here from Italy, San Sisto in Pisa, San Bartolomeo all'Isola in Rome, and then San Di Giovanni e Paolo in Rome as well. There are probably some 25 bell towers in Rome alone that have bacchini decoration on them. And then the numbers obviously multiply exponentially as we move outside of Rome to the rest of Italy and beyond to the Mediterranean. They ornament exteriors and bell towers most often, as you see here, and consist of an eclectic array of ceramics from across the Mediterranean. The use of bacchini was a pan-Mediterranean phenomenon as well, found in France, Spain, Turkey, Greece, and Egypt, with their most extensive distribution in Italy. The city of Pisa was bacchini central in Europe, boasting 25 buildings that displayed almost 2,000 pieces of pottery, most of it imported. It is not known why or how this type of decoration came into being and flourished, but it can be found far beyond the Mediterranean in Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula, to name just a few additional locations. These sites were all economic hubs, sort of pathways along an international trade, indicating that bacchini use and international commerce went hand in hand. So once again, related to bacchini here, is brown and green ware, and specifically tin-glazed ceramics from the Islamic world, served as the prototypes of the development of one of the most popular forms of ceramics in Western Europe, and that is maiolica. Julia touched upon this briefly, and I'll do a little bit of a larger discussion of maiolica. Italian and Spanish ceramicists excelled at this technique, producing ever more sophisticated decoration that extended beyond the standard green, brown, blue, and gold color scheme, except that I just only showed green, brown, blue, and gold color scheme, but trust me, there are other colors, and incorporating heraldry and narrative scenes, both secular and religious. So we've got historiato ware here. I chose a religious subject of the nativity, but we could have scenes from classical mythology that you would find in maiolica. Then more heraldic examples in the middle there with the arms of Pope Leo the 10th. And then from Deruta there on the far right, a kind of patterning and ornamentation that most closely reflects Islamic approaches to tin-glazed pottery with floral and geometric ornamental decoration. So this historiato ware became a hallmark of artistic production in the Renaissance, and as we will see shortly, made its way to the Americas, where it formed the foundation of a local ceramics industry. Maiolica then is a second manifestation of this cycle, another cycle of import, imitation, and export that extended on a global scale. Lusterware was produced through a complex multi-step process to create an iridescent metallic sheen on ceramic objects. And the significant aspect of lusterware is that you cannot tell how to produce lusterware by looking at a lusterware vessel. So it is such a complicated and time-consuming technique that you really need to have had shared technical expertise by the makers, by the ceramicists creating these objects. So it means that not only do we have objects moving, but people moving and interacting as it related to this very technical, highly complex, and shall we say, difficult kind of technique. The luster technique, as Julia mentioned, first appeared in Iraq in the early 9th century, and then spread to Fatimid Egypt, Syria, and Iran. By the 11th century, these wares could be found in Western Europe, where they were collected and copied. In the production and distribution of lusterware, the Iberian Peninsula played a central role. There is a lusterware pottery industry developed that came to rival a lusterware pottery industry developed that came to rival other Islamic production centers. Luster was produced in the Nasrid kingdom, particularly in Malaga, where it is likely that the famed Alhambra vases were created. There are only about 10 entire vases that exist of these kinds of vases in the world. They're almost as tall as I am. They're massive objects that are not glazed on the inside, and so they are not impermeable, and so their functionality is limited. So presumably they were made simply to be beautiful, and they use the luster ware technique combined with blue, with standard motifs of geometric and floral decoration, and some animal forms that you see here. Valencia became a major center when Muslim lusterware specialists were brought in to ply their craft there. The pottery workshops in Valencia, and particularly Manises, became so successful that most of the Spanish lusterware created in the 14th and 15th centuries has been attributed to these centers, and not to Malaga, as the wares from those two centers are virtually indistinguishable. Really, the only way to distinguish Malaga ware from Valencia ware is by looking at the pot itself and not the glaze. So you would need to either break it or do a serious kind of excavating in order to find out where these wares came from. So some standard decorative designs here, once again with the blue and gold palette. A very, very large plate that Flavio is going to talk about, or at least have on his presentation, that was created potentially for a Portuguese client, and then an object from the Met that has the arms of Blanche of Navarre. And this is just one of the few Met objects that I am presenting here because they have such an extensive collection, as Julia noted, but also because the Met has been extraordinarily proactive in terms of digitizing its collection and making it available for people to consult online, providing thematic essays and timelines, et cetera. So they have ensured that these works kind of move beyond the galleries to a larger public. Certainly they are downloaded by me. That I can guarantee you. Whether produced in Malaga or Manises, Spanish lusterware was highly prized all over Europe. Royalty and nobles from England, France, Italy, and the Low Countries purchased ready-made pieces or had personalized commissions undertaken. Religious institutions also commissioned lusterware, as seen as this basin with the monogram of Christ on it on the right, and the popes in Avignon were known to have commissioned luster tiles for the Palais des Papes. In the ultimate tribute to the quality of Spanish products, lusterware from Spain was shipped to Egypt and even Iran, places from which luster had originally been imported in the early Middle Ages. So in this cycle of import, imitation, and export, goods and technical knowledge first moved east to west, but then reversed their trajectory to travel from west to east, from the Iberian Peninsula back to the Near East, where the technique originated. The last section of the paper highlights the role of the Western Mediterranean, and particularly the Iberian Peninsula, in the movement of ceramics to the Americas. With the Spanish colonizers came all the symbols of status and prestige from home, including maiolica, like these examples from Talavera de la Reina, located to the west of the city of Toledo. Transporting shiploads of ceramics, however, was costly and took up space that could be used for more expensive commodities. So soon after the conquest, ceramics workshops were established, particularly in the Viceroyalty of New Spain. In addition to tableware, there was a great interest in tile production to ornament all the new Christian religious structures being built in the colonies. This tile decoration was particularly prevalent in and around Mexico City, and I'm showing you the Casa de los Azulejos in Mexico City here on the left, and especially in the state of Puebla. So all over in the city of Puebla, and then in the state of Puebla itself. The central image is from an hacienda in the state of Puebla that has, I suppose you could call it Pacini, a Talavera Poblana, or Talavera from Puebla, where that is integrated into this decorative fountain. And then this creation of tiles, not unlike the Islamic decoration that was used in Ottoman Turkey, but in this case on the exterior of buildings, is manifested by this Church of San Francisco in Acatepec that is absolutely covered with polychrome tiles. That creates an aesthetic that was based on Spanish designs, but in Spanish structures, most often these tiles would be on the inside, and then they're moved to the outside and then adorning structures in this absolute blaze of color and texture that you see in these Mexican examples. So by the 1580s, a thriving industry was established in Puebla, Mexico, producing tin-glazed ceramics that emulated wares created in Andalusia, but especially in Talavera de la Reina. That is what the wares that I just showed you here. Spanish Talavera, well, let's go back there. Spanish Talavera wares consisted of floral and geometric patterns with some human and animal forms. And the Talavera Poblana, created in Mexico, maintained the strong blue and white color palettes. This tendency was further strengthened by the influx of another international import, blue and white porcelain from China. And this is Talavera ware that has a strong influence. It shows a strong influence from Chinese porcelain. The Manila galleon trade was established in 1565, bringing silver to East Asia in exchange for tea, silk, spices, and human beings. Porcelain as well was included in these cargoes that made their way to the Americas. So at this point in the presentation, we've come full circle. Los extremos se tocan, as the expression goes. And we have a direct connection between China and Mexico here. The Puebla pottery industry continues to the present day, but is increasingly threatened by, you might have guessed it, less expensive Chinese imitations of Talavera Poblana ware. So this is contemporary globalism at work at this point. So to conclude, in spite of their weight, bulk, and seeming fragility, ceramics flowed freely along global economic routes. Documentation about commerce in ceramic wares is often scarce, especially in the medieval period. So the best evidence we have for their ubiquity is their physical presence around the globe. This presence in turn spurred imitation and innovation that encouraged the development of new industries and export markets. The two peninsulas, Iberian and Italian, in the Western Mediterranean were thus innovation incubators and market catalysts, creating both new objects and routes for their distribution, while defining taste, staging cultural encounter, and stimulating consumption. From the Far and Middle East to the Western Mediterranean, and ultimately to the New World, the portability, affordability, and adaptability of ceramics made them the perfect medium with which to absorb, adapt, and transform artistic influences from other cultures. Through the movement of ceramic wares, skilled ceramicists, and technological expertise, a shared culture of objects developed that spanned the globe, transcending religious and political boundaries and connecting cultures through commerce. Thank you.